The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Finally, we get to do a show off a relatively light card. I need it, guys. I need it. I need the little respite here from, spending God knows how long going over these storylines. There's so many every night, it seems, and on this Tuesday, there just weren't a ton. I might even argue that the portion of this show where we give a little preview of the following night might be more important than the part today where we're looking back at the previous one. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoopball presentation, a podcast, coming straight into your ear holes. I am your host, Dan Besbris. DanBesbris. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Besbris. I'm addicted, guys. It's for real. It happens. They warn you that it'll happen. They say, dopamine? No, that's not right. What is it? Something's getting released. Endorphins? I think dopamine is what you take when you have Parkinson's. That's not good. Endorphins firing into your brain, just oozing all over your brains. I swear, man, I am addicted to social media now, and it's not Facebook, because Facebook is the freaking worst. It's Twitter. I love it. You guys are on there all day long, just like me. Everything we say, we're back and forth with one another. It's pretty cool. It's almost like I'm not sitting alone in the corner of my bedroom in what's become my, let's see, how deep? 1, 2, 3, about a 5-foot by maybe 4-foot corner of my bedroom that I've turned into my office. Yes, I used to have an office. It's true. It was right down the hall. It was a lovely room, full size, normal adult size room with a desk and a computer and a window and the whole thing. I could have had decorations in the background. They could have been sports themed, baseball themed. You might have seen some stuff perhaps that my wife would have put up, decorations that are neurology themed, brains and such. It would have been very professional. When we had these hoopball shows, you would have turned them on. You'd been like, oh, Dan, he's in an adult-sized room with adult things in the background. Instead of now, you turn it on, you're like, oh, Dan's in his bedroom again. So I sigh. I'll use the word sigh. But then, thanks to social media, you guys can hang out with me in my bedroom all day. So that is sexy. What do we got coming up on today's podcast? Well, of course, we're going to look back at the short Tuesday card. There are a few games that I want to spend a couple minutes on, just with thoughts on how we're going to proceed on a handful of particular players. I want to mention a trade that I made that some of you may have heard about. I discussed it already on the real Big Three with Scott Bogman and Jonas Nader. That one available through the ITL channels, the In This League podcast, guys. You can get that Big Three show. We recorded it last night, and Lord Bogman puts that thing out before he goes to bed, so that's already floating out there in cyberspace. But I'll bring up that trade on today's podcast as well, just to throw a few thoughts out there. There have been a lot of trade things going on, actually, in my leagues. This is when they start to happen, and I've been hammering people with shotgun blast. I'm losing sleep, staying up later, sending trade offers out. It is stupid on my part, but I'm doing it anyway. And then, of course, we'll get you ready for a pretty big Wednesday. Fairly big Wednesday card, actually. Good size. Thank you to all of those listening on Dash Radio. Hello to you, by the way. Glad you found the podcast. However, you stumbled across us here at Fantasy NBA Today. We're thrilled to have you. Again, you can follow me, as I mentioned, on Twitter. You can also follow Hoopball on Twitter. That is at HoopballFantasy is the Twitter handle for our benevolent overlords at The Hoob, because they deal in fantasy basketball. They traffic in fantasy. Like the Old Spice channel. Squiggly lines and all. That's how we do it here at Hoopball. At Hoopball Fantasy is that thing. That's where you get your injury blurbs, you get all of your game update news, you get anything that we put out on our podcast channels. There's also at Hoopball Tweets. You can check that out as well. Let's start digging into yesterday's card. We'd love to talk a little bit of promo stuff if we have some time in today's show, but it's going to be a little bit of a squeeze, because we also talked to my good buddy Adrian Benjamins, a segment we recorded a couple days ago, but everything has stayed pretty much constant. Digging into some buy lows, some sell highs, some what does it mean after a month and change of the season. Just kind of it's the same theme we've been following here on the pod, which is what does the first month of the season actually mean? So that'll be coming up after we dig through the Tuesday card. Without further ado, then, the Tuesday card. The Knicks lost in Detroit 115-108. They've been competitive on a night-to-night basis, and they actually covered this one by a half a point, so pretty accurate line, all things considered. Noah Vonleh got himself into foul trouble and still managed to put up a good ball game with 6 and 7, a 3-ball, and 3 blocks. 3 different Knicks fouled out of this basketball game. They committed 31 personal fouls, and 18 of them were to Noah Vonleh, Mario Hezonja, and Mitchell Robinson, 2 of whom were guys that we were keeping eyes on, one of whom was Mario Hezonja. We weren't. Enes Kanter at 16 and 14. He's been revving back up a little bit here. Tim Hardaway Jr. had a super inefficient 19 points, but he had a couple of steals and a couple of threes and made all 7 of his free throws. Vonleh is a must-start guy these days. If he doesn't pick up 6 fouls, he's really chugging. Mitchell Robinson continues to be the same results. Foul troubles, a block when he can actually get out on the floor or more, and not much else right now. He's just getting pushed around. You had to assume that was going to happen in this game when he's fighting against guys like Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin. It was sort of inevitable. And it was Blake that mostly got all the Knicks front court guys into foul trouble. He took 16 free throws in this game. Mitchell Robinson, if you're in a league where you can put him on your bench and it won't hurt you, you stash him. Because eventually they're going to turn him loose, and he's a crazy blockmeister. He's Hassan Whiteside 3 years ago. 3? 4? I've lost track of time. When he returned from a magical universe where he learned how to control his emotions and was blocking 4 shots a game. He could potentially pull that out. He doesn't have the mass to do it. But as you start to get him into games where everybody's tanking second half of the year, you got like half the teams that just start to give up. He's going to start picking up 2 to 3, maybe even 4 blocks at times, because Enes Kanter's going to be, hopefully, on the move. Maybe not. I don't know. They might just have to phase him out. One way or the other, there's going to be more Mitchell Robinson later. However, if you're in a league where every game counts in an unlimited games format, daily, where you're just moving your roster around every day, and you're using that... By the way, thank you to Yahoo for implementing the week-long start... whatever it is, the start players button, he's going to hurt you. He's been flat out bad. He played 10 minutes in the first half, picked up only 2 fouls, played 6 minutes in the second half, picked up 4 fouls, and you got 2 points, 5 boards, and a block, and 2 turnovers. I mean, this was a bad game by all accounts, and so I understand when people are like, I can't sit on him. But if you're in a situation where you've got a guy at the end of your bench in a roto format, and you have games capped, and most games capped are anywhere from 82 to 90 games per slot, per roster slot. You don't need all 14 guys on your team to be playing. You only need probably 12 of them. 11 if you're going for 82. 12 if you're going closer to 90, right? That's an extra 80 games, something like that. You try to factor in injuries and so forth, 12 and change, whatever it happens to be. You have room on your team for a stash, which, by the way, is I love the fact I'm in a bunch of leagues this year, and I've had a big impact on adding bench slots instead of injured reserve slots. I hate the IR, because then you have to worry about dropping somebody when you want to bring a dude off the IR. Just add an extra bench slot. Just have the injured guy sitting on your bench. And that's basically what you're doing here with Mitchell Robinson. So you sit on him if you can. If you're in a format where you can't sit on a guy without having to play him every game, then I don't know that you can hold him right now. Maybe he's pushing you over the top in blocks on a week-to-week basis, but I don't know. Kevin Knox is not good. I don't know how we're still getting questions about him. He's just not. He's not there. It's a long way off for him. Alonzo Trier is a guy we're getting questions about right now because he had 24, 10, and 7 in yesterday's basketball game on 11 shots. He got to the free throw line 12 times in that ball game, and he was extremely efficient. He made 7 out of 11 buckets. I mean, 11 shots, 24 points. That's a really big deal. And so I understand why everybody's like, do I need to be picking up Alonzo Trier this second? And the answer is not really, because he doesn't have a steal since November 14th. He doesn't have, I'm going to repeat that because it's kind of amazing. He doesn't have a steal since November 14th. I can't even get his damn player page to load half the time. He's struggled at times with free throw shooting, which does matter. It does matter, and he didn't make a ton of them in yesterday's game. He's at 80% for the year, which is good, and that should be sustainable, but, 75% yesterday. We're talking about a guy right now who, and this discussion we have so many times, lately in particular, for whatever reason, we've had this discussion a billion times, because all these guys that do the same things are surfacing. Alonzo Trier, number one, he's not going to shoot 62% for the year. You know who shoots 62%? Guys like DeAndre Jordan and Domantas Sabonis, who are playing at 7 feet tall right in front of the rim, not guards. He's good, by the way. This is like, oh, God, I hate that I have to do this. I don't hate Alonzo Trier. I don't hate Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I don't hate Colin Sexton. I don't hate any of these guys. It's an absurd thing to suggest that I hate actual basketball players. They're just, for the game that we play, Fantasy NBA, they are commodities. What I hate is their value. These guys have giant, gaping, unfillable holes in their fantasy game. There was a stretch earlier this year where Alonzo Trier had 7 steals over 4 games, and he has had 0 for the last 7 consecutive games. 1 or 2 games is a fluke, 7 games is something different. He does not do stuff on the defensive side of the ball. He doesn't shoot the three-pointer all that much. He had 1 in yesterday's game. He had 3 games ago in the other sort of big explosion game he had. But other than that, he hasn't had more than 1 basically all year. So he doesn't shoot the 3. He doesn't do anything on the defensive side. Tell me how he's any different than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who everybody is also really excited about. And it's cool. These guys are good basketball players, but you have to do more stuff. Alonzo Trier had 24, 10, and 7, and in a 9-category format, he had the 4th best line on the Knicks, behind Damian Dotson, because Damian Dotson had 3 3-pointers and a steal, and didn't turn the ball over 3 times. These things matter. The 10 and the 7 were very interesting. I don't think that that's something you're going to see a ton of out of a guard. Fine. There are going to be games where he rebounds a little bit better. Of course, remember Noah Vonleh was in foul trouble. Pistons took a ton of 3-pointers, so you had some longer rebounds coming out to the guards. Would I take a flyer on Trier? No, actually. I know you thought the answer to that was going to be yes. I don't trust the Knicks as far as I can throw them. This is 2 out of 3 good games for a guy. We saw Trey Burke do it for 3 games in a row, and then he's disappeared for 2 of the last 3. Trier's in that rotation of David Fizdale trying to figure out who's going to do what on a night-to-night basis. And to me, you're not trusting these guys. You trust Cantor, you trust Hardaway, you trust Vonleh, because they have solidified roles. They're out there expected for 30 minutes a game, and when they're out there for 30 or more, they are going to do enough to get them inside the top 100 or better. And then Mitchell Robinson is your upside stash guy. On the Detroit side, we've actually seen some signs of life out of Stanley Johnson over the last couple of games, but I'm going to need to see it more than... I think he's at like 2 out of the last 3 games have been pretty good also. He's in that same boat. But here's the difference between Stanley Johnson and Alonzo Trier. Stanley Johnson has done it with close to 2 steals and a block a game. And he's making 3-pointers. That's how you go from being a top 160 guy to a top 90 guy. I don't believe this is sustainable. He played 28 minutes off the bench. He played 25 minutes off the bench in the last one. But 3 out of the last 4 games, he's been productive and has shot the ball better. But when that cools off, in all likelihood, is going to turn back into a pumpkin. You can throw him on your watch list, but I'm not making any moves in that regard. Atlanta beat Miami on the road. Woof, Heat are in trouble these days. You can't be losing these games. Yikes. Omari Spellman had 14 and 4 for Atlanta. There's going to be a lot of bouncing around of stats on this Atlanta Hawks team, so let's not get too carried away. Nice to see Taurean Prince do a little bit better. John Collins is okay. I kind of like Kent Bazemore coming off the bench. I know he had a lot of turnovers in this game, but overall, the expected outcomes, basically what you saw. Jeremy Lin hurt his ankle. He only played 19 minutes. He should still be owned for when he gets healthy again. Miami side, I think you're rolling with Wayne Ellington, Josh Richardson, And Hassan Whiteside, who got his starting job, no surprise there, and then missed a ton of free throws. They need to shake things up. I guess, we're going to find out what that actually means for Miami, but they're in a bad spot right now. And Rodney McGruder, who started the year pretty well, he's probably a drop despite playing a ton of minutes. Just no usage, no threes. His percentages have been bad. I think you can find somebody better out there. His teammate, Wayne Ellington's actually been quite a bit better. Toronto-Memphis, not a whole lot there. Nice to see Danny Green get the three-ball dropping again. That was cool. Jaren Jackson Jr. got into foul trouble, and so JaMychal Green got some extra minutes. And the Lakers got blown out in Denver. No story in that one. Indiana and Phoenix is the last one I want to spend a second on today's little recap segment. Miles Turner, 2 big games. This is what we talked about. It only takes 1 week for a guy with his blocks upside to fix the other stuff. 2 games. He's gone from ranked 100 to number 74 in 9CAT. In 2 games. They were back-to-back. You didn't even have an off day in between. He literally did it in 2 days. He's shooting almost 49% from the field now. Rebounds are up to 5.7. Doesn't take much, guys. It doesn't take much. He gives you 2 more good games, and you got yourself a top 60 asset. Madness, right? Madness. The stupidness in Indiana has continued. Thad Young got 28 minutes, which is approaching what he needs to have fantasy value, but we really need to get him into the 30s. You can hang on if you really want to. I'm probably moving on. This has been like the good game for him, and this needs to be the average. So the good game blended with the bad game is well below the average mark. Darren Collison at 11 and 11 in this game. Didn't shoot the ball well, but this is why I'm not dropping the dude. He has the point guard stuff in the tank. We just need the percentages to level off. Is that so much to ask? And finally, Mikal Bridges, 23 minutes, just never really got going. I almost kind of prefer him in the second unit, so at least he can get a couple looks at the bucket. He took 6 shots in this game. Devin Booker took 21 inefficient shots for old D Book. And then TJ Warren was great. Again, 25 and 7. 11 for 20 shooting, 2 threes, a steal, a block, no turnovers. I know he's been chucking a little bit, but damn, he's been good. He's been really helpful for them. Booker's got to figure out the passing thing. They got to get a point guard, man. It's not his fault. Anyway, Bridges still had 2 steals in this game. He's a guy I'm still hanging on to. We've seen what he can do when he actually gets involved, and it's too good to just leave hanging around. But yes, I know you heard me say it a minute ago, and you thought, wait a minute, did Dan really say that? Yes, I'm basically moving on from Thad Young. I don't think the minutes are available. We need him at 31 or 32, and I don't think he's going to get there this year. And he's ranked very low, and whereas with Collison, if he fixes his percentages, he could rocket inside the top 100 pretty quick. With Thad Young, percentages are fine. Everything is basically right on his career per marks. He's just not hitting the number of minutes to translate those per minutes into real numbers. Let's talk to my guy. I will say, friends, confidants, I will say, I love the era of the guest here on Fantasy NBA Today. I love it. I love it. It's so much fun to get to meet new people, chit-chat about teams, get that inside info. But at the end of the day, guys, and this is with all due respect, of course, to everybody else, it's just nice to kind of come home every once in a while, and that's what we get to do. The last 2 Sundays, actually, I've been able to do that, because last week on Sunday, we talked to Neil Rochlani. This week on Sunday, yes, you're hearing behind the scenes when this segment was recorded, we're bringing back another old pal, Adrian Benjamins, former co-host here on Fantasy NBA Today, now the host with Neil of the Box Score Breakdown, also here at Hoop Ball. My old buddy, my old pal, the man who helped me snap my Iron Man streak. Adrian, happy late Thanksgiving to you.
Thanks, Dan, and thank you for having me. I still pinch myself when you ask me to be a guest because you have some amazing people on your show. And when you ask me to be a guest on your show, I still pinch myself that I get to be on with you. And it's a great honor. Thank you.
Poppycock, my good man. Poppycock. The part about the guests, you are 100% accurate. These guys are all, they're just kicking ass and taking names. It's really cool to get to do these deep dives. But don't do that to yourself. You and Neil are just dominating. You guys have these nightly shows. Before we get into the fantasy stuff, I want to do a little catch up because, we used to talk all the time, and now we don't talk all the time anymore. Adrian, by the way, is also running the nightly shows. For those of you out there that are premium subscribers, he's putting together all those things, making sure everybody's on time, making sure the hosts are actually there to show up and do it. But in addition to that, you and Neil host the box score breakdown, which is like the most effort level max podcast you can come up with from a fantasy standpoint. It's daily, Sunday through Thursday, so you guys do it Sunday through Thursday nights, and it airs after the conclusion of the games. I know most people that have listened to this podcast, you've heard me talk about this before, but Adrian, I got to ask you a different question than usual. The question I normally ask you is, how's the podcast going? Now that we're over a month into the season, I'm going to ask you, how are you guys doing? Because it's a grind to do a daily show.
Yeah, Dan, it's funny that you just mentioned about the grind. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Neil and I recorded. I went out on a limb and said it was the longest show in the history of hoopball. It was an hour and 50 minutes long. And maybe you can...
That's the longest.
Would you say that maybe that could be the longest show?
Oh, yes.
At hoopball?
Oh, yes. You guys are absolutely the biggest lunatics in the history of hoopball podcasting. Brew and I have done a live show on Friday where I cut off about 15 minutes at the front and about a half an hour at the back end. That went about an hour 40, but we never aired large chunks of it just because we're like, I don't know if people can handle an hour 50. But you guys... You said the hell with that. You said our listeners are better than others, and you went the full 110-minute podcast. That's like what people do for weekly shows, Adrian. You can't do that on a daily pod.
Yeah, well, we had a large 13-game slate on that Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. There was some news. We don't want to miss anything. We want to go over everything. We get really excited, by some of the storylines going on in some of these games, and we got to talk about them, and it takes some time. And, we were actually trying our hardest to not make that a long show, and we still went an hour and 50 minutes. So, but man, I really enjoy doing the shows. In fact, I celebrated a birthday a couple weeks ago, my real birthday.
Oh, you're 17th. Congratulations on turning 17 years old. That's fun. That's fantastic.
Yes, the big 17. Neil was like, hey, you still want to do this show tonight on your birthday? I was like, heck yeah, I want to do this show. Like, it's fun to do these shows. So, I don't really look at it as a grind at all, man. I love talking hoops, and talking hoops with Neil is really fun as well. So it's definitely not a grind.
There you go. You heard it. Just wait. We'll ask you again in December, and we'll see if you still feel the same way. You can find, by the way, the box score breakdown anywhere podcasts are located. The easiest way to find it is to follow Adrian on Twitter, at Adrian Benjamins. You can follow at Hoopball Fantasy on Twitter, and if I'm awake when you guys put the show out, I usually try to retweet it as well. It's at Dan Besbris is my own Twitter handle. Okay, so we made it through Thanksgiving. Sort of. You guys foolishly tried to host a Thanksgiving, which is like what a crazy person does.
Oh.
You all right? You doing okay?
It was our first time hosting Thanksgiving at our house, and it was the amount of prep that goes into just cleaning the house, cooking the food, the turkey. I felt like I was at work, man. It was crazy. And then afterwards cleaning up, and it was different than just heading over to my parents' place and putting my feet up and eating their food. So hosting Thanksgiving was a little rough, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah. We did the two Thanksgivings, if you want to call it that, just bouncing from place to place. And then with another event over the weekend, we have a 3 Thanksgiving. So I think you still win because hosting is madness, and the cleanup I can't even fathom. Because one of the Thanksgivings we go to has like 35 or 40 people at it. We are fortunate. I should say we are very fortunate to have that many members of our extended family here in the Southern California area. This is a very good thing, but I pity my poor aunt and uncle who host this thing. They end up having to hire like 2 helpers just to get things out and cleaned, or it would just be a mountain of trash. I mean, it would look like, I'm trying to think of it's not even like a dumpster. It would just be like a pile, like one, like the Triceratops dump in Jurassic Park, but of Thanksgiving food, like that size leavings. But we all survived. We all made it through. We made it now to the next week, which oddly has another sort of like Big Wednesday, Big Friday thing going on. Is there something happening this Thursday that I'm forgetting? Like, is there a big football game on the 29th that I'm unaware of? Why is it? Anyway, doesn't matter. It screws me up because in some of my weird punt builds, I don't have any centers on my team, and so I have to like scoop up Mike Muscala for 2 days. But we're a month in. This is what we're working on right now, Adrian. We've been doing sort of like the month recap, and the conclusion I think it sounds like most have come to now is that we're at a point where most, but not all, of the players' fantasy values have leveled off a little bit. Like, sort of, I'm going to say most of what you see is what you get with these guys, and you can start to treat them a little bit more like the numbers you're seeing as opposed to the ranking that you drafted. When does that point occur for you individually, Adrian? Because I think it's different for everybody. For me, it's close to now. Russ Peddle, we talked to, he said his is more like Christmas time. When do you start to really trust the numbers you're seeing from this season?
Yeah, I think it's right now. I think you kind of know who a guy is at this point of the season. There are a few guys, for example, like Cedi Osman, who started really hot, kind of came back down, is kind of coming up again. So there are a few guys who maybe their value is still a little up in the air. But for the most part, I think you pretty much know all of these players, what they're doing now. I would feel pretty safe saying that this is who they are. Dan, I got a close friend in my home league who, after 5 games, he traded Kyrie Irving for Josh Richardson. And he was really Kyrie Irving got off to a slow start, and he believed after 5 games that this was Kyrie Irving. And I told him, I said, man, you were out of your mind. Like, it is way too early in the season to be making rash moves like that. So, I love that right now is when I think you can look at a guy's value and say that it's pretty safe that, you can make trade decisions, drop decisions, pick up decisions based off of what guys are doing right now.
So then when we look through, like, say, the top 50, Adrian, what are some of the names that jump out as guys that maybe you should treat with a new lens, so to speak? Like, is Justin Holiday a top 50 guy this year? Is Giannis really outside the top 10 this year? Or are those some of the exceptions that are still floating around? Like, Niko Mirotic is another example. He's rolling along in the top 20, and he was drafted in the around 60 for a lot of folks. So how do you use this knowledge, Adrian, to build into maybe trades, or what do you do at this point in the year?
So I'm really glad that you mentioned Justin Holiday, because he was the very first guy that I looked at. So what you have to do is you have to take a look at the team and say, is this landscape of the team going to change? And for Justin Holiday, it will drastically. I mean, this Bulls team is missing Chris Dunn. They're missing Lauri Markkanen. They're missing guys like Bobby Portis. So I think Justin Holiday is seeing a nice boost here because they're missing some of their key guys. So yeah, I think Justin Holiday is a guy that you got to try to sell high on this guy. I mean, as you mentioned, right now in 9 category leagues, he's putting up 3rd round value. If you can flip him for a guy anywhere near this range, I think you got to do it. Now, Giannis, on the other hand, and I'm really disappointed to say this could be really who he is for the season. And the reason why I'm saying that, Dan, is because his team is who they are. I mean, we're not going to see any major changes to this team barring any kind of trade. So their starting lineup, all their rotation guys have been doing their thing all season, and this is the value that Giannis is returning. Now, he still can maybe improve a little bit from where he is, but I think that he's probably pretty close to where he is on the value board right now. I think this could be where he is for the rest of the season, only because I don't foresee a lot of change in the landscape of the team.
Yeah, the one thing that jumps out with him that you hope corrects itself is the 68% free throw shooting. It is worth pointing out, though, he was a 68% free throw shooter his rookie season. He's basically bounced between 72 and 77 since then. So you could see a little bit of an outlier. I think maybe you expect it to work back up to maybe a low water mark of like 72%. But he's also shooting 58% from the field, and he's a career, 51, 52 guy there. So I don't know if those things level each other off. It is disconcerting. The one thing you look at, or the second thing I guess you could look at with him is the defensive stats, which 2 years ago he was at 3.5 combined steals and blocks. Last year he was at 2.9. This year he's at 2.6. That's the type of thing that you do expect to happen as guys get a little more tread on their tires, as their teammates get better, as they don't have to gamble as often because, defensive principles are instilled in the guys. They can actually try to stay in front of their guy a little bit. So fewer, weak side rejections where you abandon boxing out and stuff like that. Do you think he gets back into the top 10 though? Because he's sort of teetering just on the outside of that at 16 right now.
This is really tough for me to say, Dan, because I love Giannis, and I was one of these guys that was drafting him like in that number 5 overall range. But I'm going to say no. And the reason why is I was not expecting this team. They have 4 guys on a nightly basis that put up solid fantasy value. Eric Bledsoe, Brogdon, Chris Middleton, Giannis. So I was not expecting all these other guys to kind of come up this season. And from a reality standpoint, I mean, they're arguably one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. So, why they're not going to change anything. I expect this to kind of be who they are for the rest of the year. So, yeah, I mean, I do expect Giannis to maybe get closer to that, maybe get a little closer to that 10 range, but I don't think he's going to be, nowhere near the top 5. I don't think he's going to get there this season.
What about Towns, looking at another guy who's also floating just outside the top 10?
Yeah, Towns is a guy that I do see surging towards the top. And the reason is them moving Jimmy Butler has really helped his game. And I think, it kind of got off to a shaky start there with all that drama that was going on with Jimmy. It's pretty clear that he doesn't play as well when Jimmy is in the lineup. So now that Jimmy's gone, I'm expecting him to improve and keep improving as the season goes on. So yeah, like right now in 9-cat leagues, he's floating just out of that first round value. I'd expect him for sure to jump in there and finish the year maybe in that 5 range, like somewhere near there.
So there are a handful of guys, it sounds like, Adrian, where you're sort of in that same boat, where you're thinking, look, like 90 to 95% of guys are basically who they are, but that last 5 to 10%, is that where you're able to find some trade opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. And, the reason is there's a huge variance on certain guys. For example, Colin Sexton, right? I hear a lot of guys that they don't want to have anything to do with Colin Sexton. And then there's some people that believe that, Colin Sexton is now in the starting lineup, getting an opportunity. He's still a young rookie, so he's going to improve as the season goes on. But if you feel like Sexton can maybe finish as a late round value, like, let's say in the 100 range or just out of the 100 range, you could probably get him for pretty cheap. Like you could probably make a trade offer. So there are guys where we're still not 100% sure what their value is because where they are at the current moment is so different from where they were at the beginning of the season. You may be able to make a move on some of these guys at a great price.
All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a little game segment on today's podcast, and it's going to be called, I don't know. I didn't come up with a title for it before the show, so there's no title. I am going to be putting Adrian in a little bit of a lightning round scenario here. I'm going to list off some names. They are real names. I'm not just going to make them up because that would be stupid. And I'm going to give you their ranking, and you're going to tell me if it's going to improve, if it's going to fall, or if it's going to stay roughly the same. And, there may not be 100% efficiency here between the two of us. But basically, we're going to look at some guys whose current rank is pretty far away from their preseason rank. And this will give you guys listening an opportunity to consider either a buy low, a sell high, or, a ride it out kind of thing. So you've heard a few of those names, and we'll just, we can knock those couple out right here at the beginning. So Giannis, pre-ranked 3, current rank is 16. You feel like that is relatively accurate. Is that correct? You said that's staying pretty close to the same. Maybe, what do you think? Climb like as many as 5 spots if the free throw comes up?
Yeah, so I'm going to say he's going to be no on the 3, but I think he'll improve on the 16.
Okay, so by a little bit there. The other names we mentioned will hit as we work our way down the list, but Giannis was up near the top, and so I figured I'd throw him out there. Nikola Jokic, he was pre-ranked 7, basically 7 or 8. That's where he went in almost every draft, and he's sitting right around the top 20. Does he improve upon his current ranking?
I'm going to say he will improve, but Dan, I was one of these guys that was not drafting him in that overall 5 to 7 range where a lot of people liked him. And the reason is because, there's some nights where he just defers so much. As we saw, there was a game earlier in the season where he only took 1 shot. Now, don't get me wrong, Jokic is a amazing fantasy asset, but I'm going to say he improves on this 18 rank where he's at now, but I don't think he's going to finish probably at his average draft spot.
Yeah, he's also in a little bit of a slump at the moment, so if you're thinking a possible improvement, this would be a nice little buy low window because his last 3 games have been sort of Draymond Greeny with not great field goal percentage, a couple of defensive stats, and a whole bunch of rebounds and assists, and certainly if you drafted him, you were hoping for some more 20-point games, as opposed to, what is he averaging here? He's averaging like 9 over his last 3 games. So that's not exactly what you're looking for. As we work our way down the list for guys that have a pretty good separation, Russell Westbrook, and he's a big 8 versus 9 cat guy. But in 9 cat, his rank is 44, which is not all that far away from where he was last year in 9 cat, because he's still not making any free throws. Is this just who he is now? Is he just a bad free throw shooter suddenly in his 10th NBA season?
Oh, man, I'm going to say he's going to improve a little bit here. But yeah, I mean, we knew in 9 category leagues that he hurts you in the turnovers, field goal percentage. And now if we're adding free throw percentage as well, he is going to likely just be lower than what I expected, because I don't touch him in the first round for 9 categories, but now I'm wondering, I think he's going to maybe finish more towards the beginning of the 3rd round type value. So I do expect him to maybe improve where he is now. He missed some games in the beginning of the season due to injury. So I'm still kind of wondering if he's getting up to speed. I think he'll improve as the season goes on.
Did he have the worst triple-double in modern NBA history in that? That was rough, man. What was he, 3 for 30 from the field? But he had a triple-double, so, And,
people overrate triple-doubles so much. People will just be like, yes, he got a triple-double. But if you look at the game, accurately, wasn't actually a great game.
Yeah, I mean, I know he does things to help the team, but they might have been better without him that particular night. Victor Oladipo, he was pre-ranked right around the turn, 10 through 12 range, and he's currently ranked in the high 20s. He, much like Westbrook, has been having some weird issues at the free throw line. Now he's got a knee problem. Is this a guy you're worried about, or is this a big buy low window?
I think it could be a big buy low window. His values kind of fluctuated this season. There was a time he was floating just outside of first round value, and now he's fallen again, as you mentioned, dealing with that knee injury. So I think you can maybe buy low on him right now. I know I own him in a few leagues. I'm a little frustrated with him. So if you maybe you can find that frustrated owner, make a buy low offer on him.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you on that one. I think the free throw percent starts to come back a little bit for him. I do think the steals and blocks probably stay lower than last year. The 2.4 and 0.8 for him were either at or above career highs in both of those marks. That's the kind of thing that usually doesn't hold, especially if you're dealing with a knee injury. The field goal percent, which was super high last year, also coming back down a little bit. I think that probably holds. But with the free throw number, if that comes back up by 10%, he can gain a full round of value because he's taken 5 of them a game. So yes, I'm with you. I don't know that he gets all the way to 10 or 11, but I don't think he finishes it around 30. That feels too low. I'm going to jump over Ben Simmons because he was a punt free throw guy, and I think people had to know that getting into it, so he's not my concern. Adrian, I had to do this to you. Your guy, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Donovan Mitchell, rough start to the year. He can't possibly finish in the 70s, right?
Dan, this breaks my heart. This is a heartbreaker for me. I'm not going to say he's going to finish in the 70s, but I'll be honest, might be more like the 50 range. And I drafted him second round in a couple leagues. So this has been a huge disappointment. It's just not happening for this guy. I thought that we'd see this kind of sophomore leap from him. I thought maybe his shooting can improve. He himself had talked numerous times in the preseason about if this team is going to make the leap, that he needs to be more of a facilitator. I took that as in maybe we see some more assists from him. None of that is happening. We're not seeing any more assists. His shooting hasn't improved. He's dealing with injury issues. I mean, right now, I don't think he's going to finish this low, but he's going to be nowhere near that second round value where I drafted him in some leagues.
So here, you're a good person to ask about this, actually, because you were someone that did end up with some Mitchell, I don't want to say shares, because I think that's a weird thing to say about players, but that's what I'm getting at here. What would you take for him right now if somebody made you an offer? Because to me, it feels like he's one of those guys where people drafted him early enough that they're almost like, I just can't sell right now. I basically just have to hang on and hope it gets better. But in an effort to do two things here, one, talk you off the ledge, and two, kind of take the contrarian position, I would love to trade for him right now because when you look at his numbers, Adrian, you said it, it's almost the exact same year over year, except for a dip in field goal percent. Everything else is like carbon copy. He's down 1 rebound. He's up 1/10 of a steal, 1/10 of a block. He's committing 2/10 of a turnover less per game. His free throw percent is within 2/10 of a percentage. So 2/1000ths of one another season over season. The only thing that's down is that his shots aren't falling as frequently. And to me, the Jazz as a whole have been pretty bad this year. As they start to come together a little bit, he probably starts to improve. And yes, I agree with you. Maybe you're looking at like a top 50 guy and not a top 25 guy. But what would it take to pry him out of your hands? Is it like nothing, cold dead hands kind of thing? Or is there somebody you'd accept in return? Or a range of players, maybe is the better way to ask it. Is there a range of guys you'd take back and just say, you know what? This is like, all right, if somebody gives me a nice guy ranked between 50 and 60, I'll just do it and I'll take the hit on Donovan. How do you deal with owning a player who you believe comes back a little bit, but also you sort of believe is not going to quite get to where he was drafted?
So I'm going to take a loss on this, obviously, because no one in their right mind would give you second round value where I drafted him. And in one of the leagues, which is my home league where I have him, I'm hurting in point guard stats. So I would probably need maybe a 4th or 5th round value back from him. Guys like Eric Bledsoe, Mike Conley, Zach LaVine, and maybe like CJ McCollum. I'd probably move him for guys like that. Now, I don't know if that, if fantasy owners that have these guys would be willing to part with these guys for Donovan Mitchell. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't want to go much lower than that because you spend a second round value on this guy. I still do believe he can turn things around. So, I don't want to flip him for like a 6th or 7th round guy.
So C.J. McCollum is an interesting case because he was pre-ranked around 30, and he's sitting right around 50 as well. It does feel like their fantasy games are not that dissimilar from one another. Let me ask you this. Would you take Aaron Gordon for Donovan Mitchell?
Well, specifically in this league that I'm thinking of where I got him, I'm really stacked in the forward.
Okay. What about
with forward players? So I probably would not. But looking at the trade in a vacuum, I think it would be a fair deal.
What about Mike Conley? Since that's a point guard now.
Yeah, and this is really interesting for me to say because I was a do not draft Mike Conley guy because he burned me 2 seasons in a row. So he's looked really great this season. From a reality standpoint, I'm super happy to see him healthy and playing well. He would actually be a perfect guy for me to flip because I need a lot of help. I'm like floating at the bottom in assists in this league. So
yeah, it's hard to analyze these types of things in a vacuum. I realize that. So I thought I'd try to find you a guy who had that sort of late 40s ranking right now, and a little bit more limited on the upside front than perhaps a guy like Donovan Mitchell, but also now it seems a little bit safer as well. So that's an interesting take. That's what I was thinking. I think there's a psychological aspect to it, and you can confirm or deny this, where when you spend a high pick on a guy, you almost can't sell low. You like the brain just can't get over it. And I don't know that it's a good idea. In fact, I don't think I would recommend selling on Donovan Mitchell right now. I don't think he falls any farther than this. But I also think there's a psychological aspect where, let's say he's still ranked 70th a month from now, I still don't think people would sell him just because he was drafted probably inside the top 30. I think it's fully a mental thing with guys like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's kind of weird to hear these words coming out of my mouth because, as I mentioned, Mike Conley was a do not draft guy coming into the year. You know how high I was on Donovan Mitchell. He was one of my favorite draft targets. So for me to now tell you I'm willing to flip him for Mike Conley, even for me to say that out loud, it feels like a shock. But, we gotta at this point of the season, as we mentioned earlier, we kind of know now who guys are. I feel like Mike Conley's pretty safe. He's looked really good. And then the flip side, we talked about the problems that Donovan Mitchell's having. So you got to kind of accept mistakes that you've made, and you got to be smart enough to, maybe make a move like this.
All right, 2 more guys that were drafted relatively high that are underperforming by a ton, and then we'll do a couple of names of guys that were drafted super late that are overperforming by a ton, and then we'll wrap this thing up. LaMarcus Aldridge, drafted in the 30s, he's at 97, and Miles Turner, drafted in the early 40s, he's at 99. Do either of these guys come back anywhere near where they were drafted, or are we stuck with top 100 guys? Which I feel crazy even asking it. I feel like they've got to come back up a little bit, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think they're going to come up a little bit, but as I mentioned earlier, I always try to look at the landscape of this team, and the Spurs, I feel like they are who they are. I don't see any big changes to this team, so I don't see a dramatic increase in value for Aldridge, but I do think he's got to improve from where he is right now. But it's not like I don't think I'm going to see him jump up into that 3rd or 4th round value range or near where he got drafted.
And Miles?
Miles Turner, I think this is who he is, unfortunately. And Dan, this is another guy I was really high on coming into the year. I was one of the guys that bought into the yoga watch and all that stuff. And I'll be honest with you, my outlook on Turner now has this is who he is. I think next year, probably not a guy I touch at all unless he falls pretty far. He's just not an alpha type guy. It's kind of clear that I don't know. I'm maybe he can improve a little bit, but I think this might be who he is, which is very disappointing for me to say.
Yeah, I know what's funny with him too is if he could just get back to his percentages from 2 years ago, he could jump from top 100 to probably top 60 because there's only a handful of guys that are blocking 2.5 shots a game. It's really easy to rocket up the standings when you're providing an incredible specialist value. You just have to be serviceable in the other categories, and he's not right now, but he's not that far away. I mean, he's like 2 good weeks away from being able to jump 3 rounds. So I'm hoping, beyond hoping, he's a guy that I would, and this is like the best, this is what I always used to say about betting on sports. The best bets are the ones that feel disgusting when you make them. And I think buying low on Miles Turner falls into that category. I would throw out some top 75 kind of guys and see if a Miles Turner owner would be so frustrated as to send him back to you, because those types of blocks just don't grow on trees. And if he has a month where he shoots 52% and shoots 80% at the free throw line, then he goes from top 100 to top 60. So there's my argument for the other side, because he's a guy where I agree with you, and I think people are in full panic mode with him right now. Quickly, a couple of names of guys that have overperformed wildly this year, and what do we think they're going to do? I'm not going to go to the slight overperformances. I don't think those are as interesting, but a couple of big men that are inside the top 25 right now, Adrian. Their names are Nick Vucevic. That's an interesting one. Niko Mirotic. You basically want to be named Nico right now. And JaVale freaking McGee, who has stayed inside the top 25 even after the addition of Tyson Chandler, because he's just going like 6 for 7 shooting every game with 2 to 3 blocks. And this is like what I'm talking about with Miles Turner. All he has to do is be JaVale McGee right now, and he'll be a top 25 guy. JaVale can do it. Okay. Where do these guys actually end up? Like, can Vooch be a top 10 guy? Can Nico be a top 20 guy? Can JaVale McGee be a top 25 guy? I don't know. I feel like the answer to all 3 of those is no.
Vucevic scares me just a little bit, only because I think that the team will eventually want to give Mo Bamba, their prized rookie center, more of a look. And I'm actually, there was a lot of buzz going into the season that Vucevic was available for a trade. And I'm kind of wondering right now if the Magic, they're not that he's playing well because they're pumping up his trade value. He's playing well because he's a great player. And I don't think that is legitimate. That is valid. And he right now is in first round value because he's great. But I do wonder if the Magic are going to look at this as an opportunity to kind of sell high on him. And because, the Magic, I don't think they're trying to win a title so I'm really wondering if maybe Vucevic gets moved. So this is a hard one for me because I do think he can continue putting up this real high value talent-wise. But from a team standpoint, I wonder if maybe they move him. He gets moved to a situation where he goes to a winning team where he gets, much lesser role. So he's a guy I would probably try to flip if I had the opportunity to. You could probably sell him and get a huge haul for him right now. And then the other guy we were talking about, who were we talking about? JaVale McGee.
Yeah, and Mirotic, actually, if you want to throw them in there too.
So I think Mirotic is locked and loaded, man. I don't really foresee much change to his team landscape. So his minutes feel safe. His role and usage on the team feels safe. Now, maybe he drops off a little bit because he's been playing out of his mind to start the season. But I would feel, if I owned Mirotic, and unfortunately I don't own him anywhere, I would feel great about having him. I think he's just going to be a solid stud for the rest of the year. JaVale McGee, I'm a little bit worried about. I'm really glad that he's survived that Tyson Chandler. When they added Tyson Chandler, I actually felt like JaVale McGee was going to be fine. And then they started closing games with Tyson Chandler. And just that little dip for JaVale McGee's value, I was kind of scared. And now JaVale McGee kind of weathered that storm and he feels good again. But I don't know, man. I just feel like if you can flip him for a rock solid, safe asset, I would probably make that move. But also, too, man, I do kind of feel like we all undervalue JaVale McGee greatly at the start of the season, and he's going to be a solid fantasy asset for the rest of the year.
And there you have it. You're out of the hot seat. The lightning round has ended. The clouds have parted. The sun has returned. And we can enjoy the rest of our day. Adrian Benjamins, you can find him on Twitter at Adrian Benjamins. Check out the box score breakdown It comes out at the end of ball games Sunday through Thursday through traditional podcast channels and, of course, at hoop-ball.com. My man, I miss you, buddy. It's good to talk to you again.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It was fun.
Oh, everything always ends up taking me longer than I expect. I love talking to Adrian. I love doing recaps, but that cuts us down a little bit here on our preview. 10-game Wednesday. Philadelphia by 12.5 over the New York Knicks on a back-to-back. Charlotte also by a dozen. They're hosting the Atlanta Hawks on a back-to-back. Brooklyn catching 3.5 at home. Houston 6.5-point favorites at home to the Dallas Mavericks. Thunder, another dozen floating around out there over Cleveland. New Orleans, 6-point home favorites over the Washington Wizards. Minnesota is laying 4.5 to the visiting Spurs. Milwaukee laying 14.5 to the Chicago Bulls. Portland by 8 over the Orlando Magic, and the Clippers by 11.5 over the Phoenix Suns. I don't much care for the gambling lines on this card. We're gonna go through some stretches, by the way, folks, every once in a while, where there's just a few games where you don't have any like revenge angles, you don't have any teams coming off blowouts, you don't have any scheduling quirks, and it's best to just play it safe in those spots. You also have some injuries that factor in, right? Like Houston was a team that was kind of on the rise. They're dipping a bit with Chris Paul out. He's a game-time decision, so we'll have to kind of wait and see on that a little bit. Washington has been playing better. They've been playing better. New Orleans has been in kind of a weird spot lately. They're coming off a loss to the Boston Celtics, so maybe they're on a bounce back. Wizards playing better with the new look lineup. I mean, there's just so many factors that are banging heads with one another that, to me, it's best to leave a lot of stuff alone. I think the line with Orlando is starting to catch up a little bit where people realize that they are competitive on a night-to-night basis, but that's probably the closest team I would consider to betting on. Portland's been in a little bit of a skid. Do they bounce back? Maybe. They finally got a little bit of rest. This is why I don't like the card. There's something talking you off of basically every single team. From a fantasy standpoint, woof, a lot of things going on tonight. We're watching Philadelphia, the usage rate there. Wilson Chandler seems like he's won the power forward job to himself, but can he do enough with it? The Knicks. Which of the Knicks is going to get hot again tonight? Atlanta's new look lineup. Old man Marvin for the Charlotte Hornets has been playing really well lately. Donovan Mitchell expected back for the Utah Jazz. Dallas, not that interested, amazingly. Houston, does Chris Paul play? What about PJ Tucker's role? What about James Ennis? Cleveland, can Rodney Hood take a bunch of shots again for the Cavaliers? He's been playing a little bit better lately. David Nwaba out again, so that means more Larry Nance. That's been a good sign for them. The Wizards, we're watching Kelly Oubre like a hawk. He needs to get more than 23 minutes or I'm moving on from that one. I know you can sit on him and hope for a trade, but that could happen now or February, and it's not worth just sitting on a guy that whole time. And Markieff Morris has been playing his tail off the bench, but does Dwight Howard actually play at all? We got these weird stories coming out about old D12. Minnesota, the Taj versus Saric battle continues. Taj seeming to get the slight edge over the last week or so. Chicago, Milwaukee, nothing there. Orlando, Portland, Jonathan Isaac, we're tracking his minutes. It sounds like Yusuf Nurkic is a go for the Portland Trailblazers, so that sort of ruins any angles we were thinking about in that ball game. Mikal Bridges, we're watching in Phoenix again, and of course with the Clippers, we're always watching to see who gets to take the shots on that ball club. Homework assignments for tonight. I want you watching the Wizards. That's important to see how Kelly Oubre gets deployed and how the rotations take shape. And Phoenix, I'm not going to make them a homework assignment, but I would like to see what goes down with Bridges. That's another big piece of the puzzle tonight. We got these guys that we're kind of sitting on a little bit, and we want to see them take one small step forward. I promised I would mention the trade I made, and I'm going to leave it to you guys to react. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. In a punt assist build, I traded Eric Bledsoe for Jaren Jackson Jr. That's right. JJJ. I should have told Adrian. I forgot. It hadn't happened. That's right. It hadn't happened when we talked. What do you think? What do you think? I'm a lunatic. DFS contest coming up on Friday. Make sure to stay tuned to our Twitter handles. We'll get you that information as it becomes available. Tomorrow, we talk to Quentin Alberti about the Cavs and the Celtics, and Friday, we'll wrap up the week with a live show with the great Aaron Brewski. I am Dan Besbris. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is Fantasy NBA Today. Have a great Wednesday. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.